If you didn't think they were going to talk, it turns out they're already talking. And when I say that, the people I'm referring to matter a lot. They are the alleged victims of Sean P. Diddy Combs. And you know the culture is not to talk, right? But we've got sources. Federal agents say they're talking. Floodgates have opened. Not only that, we've got an update tonight as to P. Diddy's whereabouts. All of this as we wonder where his two planes are when they were sitting on the tarmac ready to take off from Miami and from California. Also, where his jet was going, where it did not go, where his yacht is, and where P. Diddy might actually be tonight. We got the location update, but we've also got some ghosts from Diddy's past. If you're old enough to watch this show after 10 o'clock at night, you're probably old enough to remember that J-Lo was P. Diddy's girlfriend a couple decades ago when a whole bunch of yit hit the fan in a New York bar. Well, it turns out she had an assistant that spent a fair bit of time in the company of P. Diddy, and that assistant is talking. You're going to hear all about that tonight. Also, have you seen this documentary on Netflix? It's called The Program. Let me just tell you right now, as soon as this show's over, run, don't walk. You have got to see this documentary. It's all about what was considered a school for troubled teens in upstate New York. It was called, sort of a weird name, the Academy at Ivy Ridge. Sounds really fancy. The allegations against this now defunct school are bone-chilling. And the filmmaker, who was a former student there, got herself back into that abandoned building and found a metric yit ton of files, aka evidence. And what this filmmaker has done to highlight what happened to these kids might actually bring the entire troubled teen industry to its knees. If you haven't seen it, you're alone because this is like one of the #1 shows on Netflix right now, this docuseries. Tonight, you're going to hear not only about how the cops are now digging in, investigators are looking, and where that evidence is now. Man, I can't wait. The expose of dirty secrets on this one is just remarkable. And then another throwback to the J-Lo days, not even, actually it was only about 10 years ago. There was this thing called the knockout game. And it started kind of in New York, and we thought maybe it was just sort of a thing where, you know, people were punching people out on the sidewalk, maybe for cred, maybe for whatever it was weird and it kind of went away. And now it might be back. Now it might actually be back. Because several women in New York have reported being punched, cold-cocked in the face, sucker punched out of nowhere, leaving massive bruises, head injuries. And we have a development tonight that might actually lead to a single perpetrator. You're going to hear from a woman who was punched, and tonight who may actually have found evidence as to who the assailant was. P.S. Guess who else was punched? Bethany Frankel, one of the Real Housewives. And so it's a thing. It is now officially a thing. Okay, let's start here, though. When someone as rich and powerful as Sean P. Diddy Combs is under investigation, the allegations as serious as sex trafficking and weapons, you gotta know that a lot of people won't say boo. Because in the world of gangster rap and hip-hop, snitches get stitches. And talking to the police can make someone bust a cap in your you-know-what. But there is word tonight that the floodgates are opening up and that the alleged victims of Diddy are singing like canaries to federal agents. I've got more on all of that in just a moment with the man with the sources. But first, where is he? Where is Diddy? For a man who sings a lot about getting out of town, can't nobody hold me down, been around the world, I'll be missing you, it seems like he actually might be pretty close by. Days after his lavish homes in LA and Miami were raided by the sex trafficking division of the Department of Homeland Security, ouch, sources say Diddy's actually still in the U.S. and he's likely on the East Coast, maybe still even in Miami. And that is the last place that he was seen in public. Remember this video from TMZ? He was pacing back and forth at a private airport in Miami after Miami-Dade police actually had intercepted his plane there and arrested an associate of his, somebody who has been alleged to be his, quote, drug mule, a man named Brendan Paul. TMZ acquired a picture of all that, and both Diddy and Brendan Paul were questioned by federal agents right next to one of Diddy's big fancy private jets. And as it turns out, Brendan Paul has a fairly impressive background, we've discovered. He played 2 seasons of Division I college basketball at Syracuse University. There he is in the orange. That's a better picture, because he's not going to be happy with the exclusive video that WSVN obtained, and it's there. That's not the picture he likes. That's him being arrested and led away from that private airport in handcuffs. He did later bail out. We also know that why Diddy and Paul were at the airport that day. Sources tell us they were headed to the Bahamas for spring break with Diddy's 17-year-old twin daughters. Needless to say, that trip did not happen. And after the plane was stopped, Paul was arrested and the feds stormed Diddy's mansions on the East Coast and the West Coast. And in just a moment, I'll be joined by a journalist who got an exclusive interview with someone involved in the raids. He has new information on the questions we're now asking for a third night. What were the agents looking for? Why so much firepower? And why, after all of that show of force, Diddy hasn't even been arrested? If it was all so big and important and dire, why is he not arrested? A few of Diddy's friends, let me scratch that, former friends and associates are definitely starting to dish, beginning with 50 Cent. 50 took to X, formerly Twitter, to post the message, quote, "This is going to break records when this drop," and he included artwork for a docuseries called Diddy Do It. I'm going to be honest with you, folks, people don't really know whether it's a joke or not, or whether it's a real docuseries, but 50 does have a production company called G Unit with a very successful track record. We're also hearing from the rapper Uncle Luke. He's a legendary figure in hip-hop. He discovered many of the biggest rappers and himself is a former leader of 2 Live Crew. That crew, by the way, put out some of the dirtiest songs with the filthiest lyrics, stuff I can't even read on the air without a lot of beeping ready. But even he says he could not stay late at Diddy's parties. I want you to hear Uncle Luke on the We in Miami podcast and check out the reaction from the women who are in the room.
You party with Diddy a lot?
Oh, no, not really. I would go to the party and leave early.
Why wouldn't you stay late?
I go to the party and leave early. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't invited to too many of those parties.
Why didn't you stay late, like after hours? Did it get crazy after that, or what?
I don't know what goes on after hours, but
he wasn't trying to find out.
I wasn't trying to find out.
We're also getting new details from a former employee of J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez. She and Diddy dated famously from 1999 to 2001, and unless you were living under a rock back then, you will remember that in December of 1999, they were both arrested after fleeing the scene of a nightclub shooting in New York City. J-Lo was detained for 14 hours, and then she was released. Puff Daddy, that's what we called him back then before he became P. Diddy and then Sean. Puff Daddy Combs was tried and he was acquitted of the weapons and the bribery charges. It was not long before the couple split for good. It happened on Valentine's Day, 2001, when Lopez started to suspect that Combs was cheating on her. But when they were together, J-Lo's staff was around Diddy a lot. And a former member of that staff is opening up to the New York Post. The reporter she spoke to, a senior writer with the Post, happens to be our friend Steve Helling, who happens to be with me now live. Steve, it's good to see you. As always, I love when you're on the program. And look at you. You are getting all the scoops today. I got so many things. I want to ask you about the J-Lo assistant. I want to ask you all about that. But first, this whole business about you talking to the agents who are, part of this raid and this investigation, and them, alluding to the fact that the witnesses, the alleged victims, are talking and a lot. Tell me what you know.
Well, as you know, Ashleigh, Miami is my old stomping grounds. So, I started reaching out to agents and I ended up speaking to one who said, yes, they actually have cooperating witnesses, cooperating alleged victims, people who are willing to talk, and what this agent told me was basically, at first everybody's reluctant, but once you start talking about being victimized or seeing victimization, you just can't stop talking. And so that's kind of what's been going on here. Obviously, as they've been finding these people through the civil suits and so forth, they're starting to figure out exactly what was Diddy allegedly involved in.
So talk to me about what they got. Were they able to sort of itemize what they seized either in Miami or in Los Angeles?
It was mostly electronics is what they were looking for. Electronics, records, communications, photos, anything like that that could bolster whatever case that they've got. Now, they haven't told us exactly what they found or, what's on these electronics. They probably don't know yet. This was only 2 days ago. And, it's going to take some time for them to really look into this. But yeah, they're looking for anything that can kind of give itineraries, places that people were going, names of people. That's what they've been looking for.
Oh, itineraries. When you said that got my spidey senses tingling, because itineraries are oftentimes corroboration evidence of what, other witnesses will say. Oh, well, I was on the plane and this happened. And then you find an itinerary that actually backs that up. I think we saw a lot of that in Epstein.
Exactly. There is a lot of similarities here. This case, if there is a case, and of course he hasn't been arrested yet, but if there's a case against him, it's going to rise and fall on what can be proven. And, as much as we want to do, victim testimony and that type of thing, it has to be able to be backed up. I was in this city, I was in this country, I was wherever with Diddy. And so they're going to be looking to kind of retrace where he was during the periods of time that he's alleged to have done these things.
So, and let's repeat that a few times here. He has not been arrested. He has not been charged. He spoke with agents. We saw TMZ's picture of him speaking with federal agents on the tarmac next to his private plane. They arrested his pal. But I am super fascinated to know if they took a phone off of him or if they took any personal electronics off of him, because we had a source in the, connected to the feds that said they were looking for him because they wanted to see what he might have on him, a phone, a tablet, a laptop, etc. But there's that TMZ picture again. And his lawyer put out a statement saying that he spoke with the feds. So let's move a little bit, because there's so much that you got. I need to cover it. The assistant of J-Lo is talking a lot about what it was like being around Diddy all that time back in the, the late 1999, 2000s. So she kind of said that he was her boss by default. What other details did she give?
Basically what she said is that, he kind of bossed us around like he was our boss, even though he wasn't, which that in itself isn't that huge of a deal. That's a bit of a power trip or whatever. But then, she was explaining that, she felt that Diddy kind of categorized women in two different ways, whether they were effable or whether they were not effable. And believe it or not, you wanted to be in the discard pile. You wanted to be one that he wasn't sexually interested in, because then he'd just kind of treat you like a servant. Whereas the others, felt really uncomfortable around him. There's no allegations of anything that really rises to the level of a crime. It's more the vibe that they felt around him. J-Lo was always surrounded by women who, had to deal with Diddy, and a lot of other times they felt uncomfortable. They just felt like there was an energy there that they weren't interested in being. He didn't have any care for their personal space, that type of thing. And you got to go with your gut with people like that sometimes. And you got to go with your gut and say, yeah, I'm uncomfortable with this person. I'm not even sure why.
Last quick question, real quick. Diddy's arrested at the airport. The word is he was supposed to be going to the Bahamas with his two 17-year-old twin daughters. Do we know, where are they? Because, Justin and King, his two kids, were in cuffs back in L.A. And by my count, I think that means there's 3 other kids still unaccounted for, too. What do we know about all the kids?
We don't know where the kids are right now, and they're keeping a very low profile. And for obvious reasons, I kind of understand why they would be doing that. I'm more interested about where is Diddy right now. I believe that he, like you said earlier, that he is on the East Coast, and Miami wouldn't surprise me, but he's not at that house. He's somewhere else.
Dang. Well, you got your job cut out for you for the next 24 hours. I'm inviting you back. Steve Helling, always love having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Steve Helling coming to us, senior writer with the New York Post now. So this case against Sean Combs is reportedly being modeled on the investigation that brought down the music superstar R. Kelly almost 2 years ago. And in that case, you'll probably remember, federal government used allegations that were made in civil suits to springboard them towards the criminal charges. They'd investigated, the civil suits and all those witnesses, and then boom, they had their case. Nadia Shihada was one of the prosecutors who basically got R. Kelly convicted of sex trafficking, and she's now a defense attorney here with me live. Nadia, we spoke last night, but I wanted to bring you back again tonight, only because we're at day 3. And, you've been on both sides of a federal investigation. I kind of expected we'd have an indictment yesterday. I didn't expect we'd have nothing. Not an arrest, really nothing with all that firepower and that show of force. Is this just how DHS rolls?
Look, I don't think it's that unusual that we didn't have an arrest yesterday. I think, often a search and an arrest are done at the same time. But once it was clear they were not arresting him yesterday, I anticipated that it was going to be a little bit of time before he actually gets arrested. They've been searching the houses for electronic devices, documents, photographs, videos, I suspect. All of that takes a lot of time to get through, particularly electronic devices, which may be locked and they'll need to open and then search through carefully.
Okay, can you walk me through that moment that TMZ captured the photo at Miami Airport where Diddy and his pal are standing beside one of the private jets of Diddy's. And you can see the agents are all there with Diddy. And his own lawyer put out a statement saying that Diddy spoke to them. What does that mean, spoke to them? Like, in your world, do you think they seized whatever electronic device he had on his person at that moment? Like, they would have grabbed a phone, they would have grabbed a tablet, they would have grabbed a laptop if Diddy had one?
Well, they would need a warrant to do that. They couldn't just grab it. He presumably could have voluntarily provided that, although I doubt that he would. But
let me jump in. But they had warrants. They had massive warrants for the 2 mansions at the very same time that they're seen there beside his jet. So my assumption is if they're at the jet, they had the warrant. So would they have grabbed it right then and there?
Yeah, if they had a warrant for it, sure, they would have certainly grabbed it. And often these warrants have provisions for allowing biometric information to be used to open devices. That's really common. So, thumbprints, your eye scan, because often law enforcement has difficulty getting into devices and that can take time otherwise.
Holy cow. Let me just be clear. If that photo shows them talking to him, but what it really means is they're showing a warrant saying, give us your devices, they can insist right then and there, open it, either with your face or with your thumbprint or with your password on a laptop or a tablet. That's usually in the warrant so that they don't have to spend all the time trying to figure out, whether it's password 123.
That's correct. That's generally submitted. And if the judge authorizes that, that's part of the procedure.
Wow. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get the detailed inventory, right? Because when they execute a warrant, oftentimes that detailed inventory should be made public. Is that the same at the federal level? Should we be getting that?
It's possible. I don't know that it will. It's particularly when the search has been as extensive of these 2 properties, it can take quite a while to draft that inventory. So may not expect to see that, very soon.
Well, I'm putting in my request right away. Nadia Shihada, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to call you again, too, because this isn't over. Appreciate this.
Sure. Thank you.
Coming up, it was called the Academy at Ivy Ridge, and it was sold to parents as tough love for troubled kids. But now a new Netflix documentary series has blown wide open accusations of brainwashing and assault and sex abuse against teachers who are still there in the community. The reporter naming names joins me next. There are kids, in the world who need more help or different help than their families or the neighborhood school can provide. That's understandable. And for them, a place like the Academy at Ivy Ridge seemed perfect. It was billed as a boarding school with caring and highly trained staff and rigorous standards. And how could that not be precisely what thousands of kids who went there needed? And why wouldn't their parents shell out thousands of dollars a month to give them the care and the education like that? Well, maybe because Ivy Ridge was nothing like the brochures promised. Instead, an explosive Netflix documentary is revealing this now defunct institution in far upstate New York, near the Canadian border, was a hotbed of physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. 2 decades ago, the state shut the place down. School wasn't even accredited. And the diplomas, they were fake, worthless. They were just paper. But boy, were they ever good at marketing to the desperate parents.
The Academy at Ivy Ridge is located in Upper New York State along the St. Lawrence River and close to the Adirondack Mountains. Its remote location helps minimize inappropriate distractions, but is still only a 6 to 10 hour drive from many of the major cities. In addition to academic curriculum, students are also taught values, integrity, honor.
Actually, not really. The true story of Ivy Ridge was vastly different. Most of the kids' first taste of that school was being ripped from their beds in their family homes and being handcuffed in the dead of night by strangers dressed all in black. A new docuseries directed by a former student of Ivy Ridge exposes the string of abuses that would follow next. The documentary is called The Program: Cons, Cults, and Kidnapping. Here's a clip.
What do you do if your child gets caught in a cycle of self-destructive or even dangerous behavior? Some desperate parents are having their children abducted, taken against their will to a behavior modification program.
The reality is torture of children.
I got here at 3 a.m. and they said I was not allowed to talk anymore and you can never leave.
They were being treated like prisoners. I had never done drugs in my entire life, but in order for me to graduate, I had to confess to using heroin, crack, cocaine, LSD.
They dehumanize the kids, that these kids are liars and manipulators. They use that to create compliance.
It's hard to comply with something that you know is wrong.
We have these handwritten, signed and dated confessions of abuse.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
They use physiological experiences to manipulate the mind.
It's meant to break you. Palms up, palms down.
It is literal brainwashing.
You are at fault. You are to blame.
Palms together, palms apart. The people that the program most wants to influence is the parents. It was basically a cult.
And we're talking worldwide.
It's $1 billion industry.
It all went into this.
And it was just to make this guy rich.
It is human trafficking of children.
All these kids being robbed of normal childhoods, it's all just still operating.
Beyond the cult-like brainwashing and extreme punishments, allegations of sexual abuse are levied against an unnamed female staffer. Take a look.
You know, you can't even smile at another human being, and now you have somebody who is like pouring so much like predatory love and affection on you, but the only thing you're able to receive or the only thing you're able to feel is like, I matter. Like, I matter to somebody. And it was not innocent. Like the first time that I was in the bed with her, like, to be honest, I can like still feel her. Sorry.
Now, several former students at Ivy Ridge, 4 in all, have named their alleged sexual abuser to the U.S. Sun in separate interviews. They say her name is Amy Ritchie and that she currently works as a mental health aide in that same town, Ogdensburg, in upstate New York. Reports now say that Amy Ritchie and several other former Ivy Ridge staffers are on leave from their current jobs at a local mental health institution, pending an outcome of a state investigation. Neither she nor anyone else has been charged with any crimes, but the local DA says his phones have been flooded with reports since the docuseries premiered. former students who say they too were victims of abuse at Ivy Ridge. He says his office is now investigating, and no trespass signs have been posted at the abandoned school to preserve possible evidence there. Joining me now is Luke Kenton, senior news reporter for the U.S. Sun. Luke, the doc, by the way, thank you so much for doing your work and then for being here as well. The doc has only been out a couple of weeks, but it seems like justice is moving extremely rapidly.
Yeah, there's been, a pretty strong response to the documentary. It's been trending on Netflix in the top 10 since it aired, and that has led to a lot of scrutiny and a lot of attention on the stories that some of these students have been sharing. And within that, there's a real drive to retroactively achieve justice for some of these students. And at the moment, that focus is on ousting the likes of Amy Ritchie from their current positions. But beyond that as well, it's the push for a criminal investigation and to see how the District Attorney's Office can proceed with some of these allegations.
Well, you have interviewed 7 former students have corroborated the allegations against Amy Ritchie, who was a teacher at the school. Not only that, but the documentary filmmaker went back with several former students to the abandoned building and found troves of files. I mean, there were just thousands and thousands of documents and files left behind. I'm assuming that the DA is, not only fielding a lot of phone calls from people who've seen the doc and maybe think they were victims as well, but is having to go through all that paperwork for actual evidence.
Yeah. Like you said, their phone has actually been ringing non-stop off the hook. I spoke to them a few weeks ago, and they said, the reports are still flooding in. Those numbers are in their dozen, both for physical and sexual abuse. But he did warn people to not enter the premises at this time. He said, they're treating it basically as a crime scene, and there's a lot of evidence still there. Reports of incidences of staff and physical assaults on students and things like that. And a lot of the students I spoke to have actually been back to the site itself to reclaim their files and to recover some of the personal information that was stored in their files as well.
And lest anyone watching think this is just one of those stories about a reform school that went too far, let me just read a couple of things. That they were not allowed to look out the window. They were not allowed to look at each other. They were not allowed to talk to each other. They were deprived of food. They were kept in isolation rooms for sometimes days on end. They were only allowed to move in military formation, actually pivoting when they turned a corner. And it wasn't just here. I've only got about 30 seconds left, but Luke, the allegations here that this was just one of many schools in a network that proliferated this kind of treatment all across the country, around the world. And as some were closed down, others continued to pop up and still are there to this day.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the students at Ivy Ridge feel very passionate about now. There are still a lot of these facilities in operation across the US, and they want to see these facilities shut down for good, because they say, though they present themselves as a rehabilitation program for these quote-unquote troubled teens, they actually leave you significantly worse off, and they're a breeding ground for predators and other bad actors.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that many have zero training, zero accreditation. This school couldn't even give real diplomas, and all of those kids that so-called graduated found themselves having to get GEDs, after. Luke Kenton, I'm going to call you back. There's so much more to the story I'd like to get to. Thank you for tonight. Appreciate this.
No, thank you.
Coming up next, what is happening in New York City? Women minding their own business on the sidewalk being sucker punched by complete strangers. The list is getting long, and now Bethany Frankel is the latest victim. The injuries are real. Black eyes, bruises, concussions. Is this a reboot of the knockout game from several years back? One of the victims joins me live with some breaking news next.
To reach adulthood. That's why vaccines matter so much. For 40 years, Rotary and partners have delivered vaccines globally. Like here and even here, in your neighborhood and around the world, Rotary is ensuring children grow up safe from preventable diseases.
Snakes, zombies, sharks, heights, speaking in public. The list of fears is endless. But while you're clutching your blanket in the dark, wondering if that sound in the hall was actually a footstep, the real danger is in your hand, when you're behind the wheel. And while you might think a great white shark is scary, what's really terrifying and even deadly is distracted driving. Eyes forward. Don't drive distracted. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
when the storm rolls in, my time to find a pet-friendly evacuation center will have run out.
The scorching heat wave will leave me powerless to cool my insulin.
I'll face a hurricane without meds. Now that's a tough pill to swallow.
Let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
For the knockout game, it's been more than a decade now, and I wouldn't really say that game is a good word to use here, because somebody would walk up to a random unsuspecting person on the sidewalk and sucker punch them so hard they'd be knocked right out. A lot of people were badly hurt. Some died. And I hate to say this, but something similar is being reported on the streets of New York City right now. A string of random vicious attacks on women in broad daylight by a man, or maybe different men, we're not sure yet, who punched them in the face or in the head.
I was literally just walking, and a man came up and punched me in the face. Oh my God, it hurts so bad. I can't even talk. Literally, I fell to the ground, and now this giant goose egg is forming, and I'm like...
I literally just got punched by some man on the sidewalk. He goes, sorry, and then punches me in the head. Holy what the hell just happened?
So I just got punched in the face walking home. I was literally like leaving class. I turned the corner and I was looking down and I was looking at my phone and like texting, and then out of nowhere this man just came up and hit me in the face.
I'm literally trying not to cry, but like I just realized I was part of a group of women that got punched. What? I literally have so many goosebumps because I'm so shook that this happened. Like I didn't register it because I had work today, but like I just texted my friend and she told me you have to make a video about this because apparently a ton of women are getting attacked.
She's right. It's even happened to Bethany Frankel, the Real Housewives star, who tells TMZ today that she was randomly punched in the face by a man on the Upper West Side and that she had no idea it was happening to other women all over the city. And there's more. A New York a woman named Sarah Harvard posted this on her socials yesterday. On Tuesday, March 19th at around 8 p.m., I was walking alone out of the Delancey Essex Street station, where I got punched in the back of my skull from a random man on the street. Since then, I've seen several New York City women on TikTok reporting they've been punched in the face. A lot of these women shared similar descriptions of the man who punched them and me. He was a black male around 6 feet wearing dreads that stopped right above his shoulders. I distinctively remember he was wearing a knit hat and was wearing a denim jacket and jeans. Most of these women say that they were looking at their phones when they were punched. I was attacked from behind. The woman who wrote those words, Sarah Harvard, who was attacked from behind in New York City, is front and center with me now. And Sarah, something that we've just learned, you may have a lead on who this person is. And I want to be careful since the police don't know yet, but what have you just found out before showtime?
So yes, thanks again for having me here. So I got a message from one of my followers on Instagram who was also a classmate of Michaela Toninato, who was on one of the TikTokers who got punched in the face. And she was a student at Parsons, and they found through the security cameras a guy matching my description of my attacker who was loitering around Parsons fashion school. And also, apparently, Michaela's also identified him as the attacker right now.
So you've had a photograph sent to you, correct?
Correct. Yep. And it's a matched description. I remember it's like pretty ingrained in my head of what he looked like. The thing is, I want to make a note that he attacked me from behind. And so when I turned around and looked back, he was already running away. So I only saw the back side of his body, but it's literally the same build, same hair, same fashion sense. So I'm pretty confident it's him, but I'm going to the police to show the photo, and hopefully through CCTV footage and also maybe the help of testimonies from other women who've been or witnesses will be able to identify his name and hopefully get him apprehended.
And just so that our audience is clear, you're going to go to the police right after you get off the show with us, because this is all just happening literally as you're coming to air. Is there, first of all, are you okay? I mean, I should have started the interview with that. Are you doing okay?
Yeah. So physically, I'm doing better. I still, like, literally right now, I have a headache. And then sometimes feel a little nausea, a little dizziness. But for the most part, like, I think what's most unbearable for me is not really the physical injury. It's just the anxiety, the post-traumatic stress of it afterwards. Like, for me, what's kind of just unbearable is just that this attack happened just a few seconds, and now it still kind of affects me a lot. I have trouble breathing sometimes. I have chest pains. It's hard for me to go to sleep. I wake up multiple times a night. Sometimes I sleep, like the last 2 days, I slept about 2 to 4 hours each. So it's just really the psychological effect of it that's really kind of just making it really, I don't know, hard to kind of recover from this, for sure.
You're a crime victim, and you know, sometimes there's strength in unity in others as well. Have you found a community of a number of other women who've had this happen, and if so, how many?
Yeah, I wouldn't say probably about 10 to 15 just from people that I've seen commented on my Instagram. And it's so interesting because you think that when you find a community of people who are like you, it's going to be comforting and wholesome, but it's really not, because to me, it just shows that there's a clear pattern here where women are being attacked in this country, or at least in this city, and nothing's really being done to kind of, prevent that from happening further, to de-escalate that. So to me, I guess when this incident first happened, I thought it was an isolated incident. I thought that I was going to be, it's like a New York crazy moment. And then after I saw all these TikTok videos, I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening to a bunch of other people. It's a repeated pattern. This could incite violence against more women. It could encourage other people to engage in violence. And on top of that, it could also happen to me again. And so I think that's when kind of the anxiety kind of set in and made me feel like I need to say something and speak about it, speak out loud, and also more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I've only got 10 seconds left, but I want to ask you, do all of the women that you've connected with, do they all say it's the same person, or do you think there's more than one?
I think there's more than one. I know for a fact that they just arrested Stibori Stora, who was arrested for, I think, hitting or punching Hallie Kate, who was like the original TikTok influencer who posted her incident. And so I know they arrested him, and I know that I've seen other videos of other people who've accused of punching them, and they're not the same as my person. But at least I know that me and Michaela have the same attacker, from my understanding.
Sarah, keep us posted. When you go to the police and you get your police report, let us know what happens, and if the person that you've now identified on that picture ends up being arrested. I'm so sorry this is happening. Thank you for bringing it to light.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Sarah Harvard joining us live tonight. And coming up next, it's been 10 years since the mysterious disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. 10 years. But now a group that believes they know what happened to Amelia Earhart thinks they can solve the MH370 mystery too. That story's next.
And there's still so much to see. If you are on Eylea or a similar type of treatment, ask your retina specialist about Eylea HD today for the potential for fewer injections.
Where is it? It's the question I always ask in my job. Where? But this one I never got an answer. I have been waiting for an answer for MH370 and all the people who disappeared with it. I guess into the Indian Ocean? That's what we all assume. But we don't know yet. Recently, however, a company called Deep Sea Vision made headlines when it claimed to have found Amelia Earhart's plane, and that's been gone for 86 years. But now that company wants to find MH370 too. They won't be the first to try, and there are plenty of theories and clues. NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart dived into some of those clues on his podcast, Reality Check, with Ross Coulthart.
It would be very complicated if it was, in fact, some kind of an accident. It would take a very complicated series of events for an accident to have caused this airplane to disappear.
We both share the frustration of not knowing for sure what really happened to MH370.
In a nutshell, the plane did not disappear. It was disappeared.
And Ross Coulthart joins me now. Okay, let's start with the first one, the Canadian, the former transport investigator. Larry Vance, Ross, said an accident would be more complicated than what actually happened. What did he mean by that?
Well, good evening, Ashleigh. What the whole search for MH370 has been based on for the last 10 years has been very much the idea, the assumption, that the plane somehow went out of control without any intervention from the pilots, that they were incapacitated in some way, perhaps by a fire or perhaps by a depressurization. There's always been concern inside the Australian investigation team, who I talk to, I'm based down here in Australia, and also in Malaysia, that there's been a worry about offending the Malaysian government, that to suggest that it might be a rogue pilot or something more sinister was too controversial. And so the search, where we've actually been looking for the plane, has been constrained by an assumption that what happened was the plane somehow incapacitated pilots, the plane flies on autopilot and somehow descends and crashes in the Indian Ocean after running out of fuel. The problem is that explanation doesn't wash.
What about the French journalist? That was the second soundbite. Florence de Chagny. She said the plane did not disappear, it was disappeared. What does she mean by that?
Okay, Florence is very much of the view that this is a cover-up, that there's been collusion between the United States, China, Malaysia, and indeed other countries like Thailand as part of a massive cover-up to conceal something that happened that involved the hijacking and bringing down of the aircraft. I'll freely admit, I'm not buying into that theory just yet. I don't think the evidence is there. I'm much more in favour of a controlled landing by a rogue pilot. But I do think that 10 years on, there's something wrong. There is something fundamentally wrong with the assumptions that have been made to determine where we've searched for this aircraft. And that's why wherever Tony Romeo and Deep Sea Vision look now, they've got to look with the right assumptions.
And people have to listen to you, Ross Coulthart. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you want to hear more of Ross, and you should, check out the full episode of Reality Check with Ross Coulthart on NewsNation's YouTube channel. Thanks, Ross.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And coming up next, you know those cute bumper stickers and T-shirts that say I'm voting for literally anybody else? Well, guess what? Now you can literally vote for anybody else because he's a real guy. You're going to meet him next. Typically do politics on this show, but tonight I'm gonna. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to literally anybody else. That is his actual name, legit. He legally changed his name in Texas to literally anybody else because he's running for president of the United States, and he believes that a critical mass of Americans would rather have literally anybody else on the ballot and in the White House than the current options that they have. I have his driver's license to show you so that I can prove to you it is not a joke. It really is his name. Mr. Elf is a 7th grade math teacher when he's not figuring out how to become the commander-in-chief. And you know what? Sometimes it can be a little tempting to imagine literally anybody else on a ballot. The odds are long, but hey, he's making a thoughtful point, and that's better than nothing. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. I'm following Diddy. What's going to happen tomorrow? Join me here. Almost next.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. Got something special for you tonight. First of all, I got new information and the key questions in the Diddy case. And I have more time to talk it through with you. Why? Because one thing we can all agree on, commercials, kind of a drag. So guess what? We're going to go single sponsor again tonight, meaning I only have a couple of short breaks thanks to my bosses for thinking out